You are here in this moment, perhaps expecting the calendar to work some kind of magic, that the turn from the 31st to the 1st will bring a different energy, a motivation you can't find within yourself. But deep down, way deep down, you already know that's not how it works. The fatigue you carry doesn't obey calendars. The existential exhaustion weighing on your shoulders won't disappear with fireworks or promises of change. You're here because you recognize that familiar sensation, that weight that isn't physical, but makes each day harder to face. And today, through the words of Albert Camus, we'll explore together this experience that's as human as it is misunderstood. The new year arrives with its empty promises of renewal, as if time were a washing machine that could cleanse the soul of what life has deposited in it. But you, who carry this deep fatigue, know it's not like that. You know there's a difference between being physically tired and being tired of existing. The first is resolved with rest, with vacation, with a good night's sleep. The second is more complex, deeper, more persistent. It's a fatigue that inhabits the marrow of your days, that colors even moments that should be joyful with grey, that transforms life itself into a weight you carry without really knowing why. Camus understood this sensation in an almost surgical way. He knew there comes a moment in many people's lives when they wake up and ask themselves, what's the point of all this? What's the point of getting out of bed, working, smiling, making plans, when in the end, everything seems to have the same taste of emptiness? It's not necessarily depression, though it could be. It's something more fundamental, more existential. It's the direct confrontation with what he called the absurd, the clear perception that our desperate search for meaning crashes against the implacable silence of the universe. When you feel this deep fatigue, you're experiencing something Camus considered one of the most authentic experiences of the human condition. You're seeing life without the consoling filters that society offers us. You're seeing beyond the comforting narratives about purpose, destiny, divine plans. You're seeing life as it is, raw and without guarantees, and this is simultaneously terrible and liberating. Terrible because it takes away our ground, liberating because it frees us from the illusions that kept us trapped. The world around you continues celebrating, making lists of goals, posting optimistic reflections about fresh starts. And you feel even more displaced, as if you were the only one who didn't receive the manual on how to pretend that a date on the calendar can change the fundamental nature of things. But the truth is, you're not alone in this perception. There's a silent multitude of people who share this same sensation, who also feel that the manufactured enthusiasm of the new year rings false when you're navigating existential exhaustion. Camus teaches us that this fatigue isn't a defect to be fixed, but a gateway to a deeper understanding of life. When you feel you no longer have the energy to participate in social theatre, when conventional motivations have lost their power over you, when you look at your own life and feel a strange disconnection, you're experiencing what he called awakening to the absurd. It's a painful moment, but also precious, because it's in this moment that you can finally stop lying to yourself. Society is in a hurry to medicate this fatigue, to transform it into a problem to be solved. It offers antidepressants, quick result therapies, self-help books that promise to restore your motivation in 10 simple steps. But Camus suggests something different. He suggests that maybe this fatigue is actually a sign of intelligence, a natural response from a mind that has finally stopped accepting easy answers to difficult questions. Maybe you're not sick, maybe you're finally awake. This existential exhaustion you feel has layers. There's the fatigue of playing roles you didn't choose, of maintaining relationships that have become automatic, of pursuing objectives that were imposed by others or by old versions of yourself. There's the fatigue of carrying expectations that were never yours, of trying to fit into molds that were always too small. There's the fatigue of pretending everything's okay when nothing seems to make sense, of smiling when your soul is screaming, of participating in conversations about the future when you can barely face the present. But there's also another kind of fatigue, more subtle and deeper. It's the fatigue of seeking an ultimate meaning for existence and always running into emptiness. It's the fatigue of asking the right questions and discovering that maybe there are no answers, or that the answers that exist aren't the ones we'd like to hear. It's the fatigue of realizing that maybe life doesn't have a predefined purpose, that maybe we're the ones who have to create our own meaning, and that this is simultaneously a crushing responsibility and infinite freedom. At this point, I need to ask you a question that might reveal a lot about your current experience. Have you ever felt like you're living someone else's life, as if you were playing a character you didn't choose in a play you don't understand? If this resonates with you, leave a simple but honest response in the comments. Write only, "I feel this too." Your response isn't just a confession, it's a way to show other people going through the same experience that they're not alone. Sometimes knowing we're not the only ones to feel certain things can be the first step to transforming our suffering into something more bearable, even into something that connects us with other human beings navigating the same turbulent waters. Camus believed that when we reach this point of existential exhaustion, we basically have three options before us. The first is what he called physical suicide, the decision to simply exit the game. The second is philosophical suicide, which would be returning to consoling illusions, pretending they work, accepting ready-made answers even knowing they're unsatisfactory, surrendering our intellectual autonomy in exchange for a little peace. The third option, and the one he defended, is more complex and more courageous. Revolt. Revolt isn't destructive anger or adolescent rebellion. It's a mature philosophical position in the face of the absurd. It's saying yes to life even knowing it has no ultimate meaning. It's choosing to live intensely, not because life has a grand purpose, but because it's our life, and it's the only one we have. It's a way of creating meaning through the very choice to live, to love, to create, to show solidarity with other human beings who are in the same absurd situation as us. When you feel this deep fatigue, you're actually facing a unique opportunity. The opportunity to stop living the life others expect of you and start living the life that makes sense to you, even if that meaning is different from what society approves. It's the chance to question everything, to discard what no longer serves, to build a more authentic existence that's more yours. But this construction doesn't happen overnight, and it certainly doesn't happen because the calendar changed. It happens day after day, choice after choice, moment after moment. It happens when you decide to do something that really matters to you, even if it's small. It happens when you stop pretending enthusiasm you don't feel and allow your honesty to be more important than your popularity. It happens when you choose genuine connections instead of relationships of convenience. The existential fatigue you feel might also be a sign that you've surpassed certain stages of development. Maybe you can no longer motivate yourself with the same things that motivated others, because you've developed a more refined perception about what's really worthwhile. Maybe you can no longer get excited about superficial achievements because your soul is asking for something more substantial. Maybe you can no longer participate in certain social dynamics because you see through them with a clarity that sometimes even makes others uncomfortable. This doesn't make you a superior person, but it makes you a different person. And being different in a society that values conformity has always been tiring. Camus knew this because he himself was different. He himself saw the world with a clarity that wasn't always well received. He knew there's a price to pay for authenticity, but he also knew it's a price worth paying. The question of the new year becomes irrelevant when you understand that true change doesn't happen by temporal decree, but by internal transformation. The calendar can turn as many times as it wants, but if you haven't made peace with your own existence, if you haven't found a way to live that makes sense specifically for you, nothing will change. You'll continue carrying the same fatigue, the same questions, the same dissatisfactions. But when you accept that maybe life doesn't have a ready-made meaning waiting to be discovered, when you accept that maybe it's your responsibility to create that meaning, something interesting begins to happen. The weight of existence doesn't disappear, but it transforms. Instead of being a burden you carry passively, it becomes a responsibility you embrace actively. Instead of being something that happens to you, it becomes something you do. This is the paradox of Camus' philosophy. He doesn't promise that life will become easier when you accept the absurd. Actually, in some aspects, it might become more difficult because you can no longer take refuge in consoling illusions. But he promises that life can become more authentic, more yours, more alive. When you stop waiting for life to make sense and start creating sense for your life, when you stop waiting for others to validate your existence and start validating yourself, something is liberated within you. Maybe the fatigue you feel is actually your soul asking for more space, more authenticity, more truth. Maybe it's your inner being refusing to continue living in a way that doesn't match who you really are. Maybe it's a sign that the time has come to stop trying to be who you think you should be and start discovering who you really are. And this discovery is a process that doesn't fit within the artificial limitations of a new year. Camus reminds us that the human condition is fundamentally solitary, but not necessarily isolated. We all face the same basic existential questions. We all have to deal with the lack of guarantees, with the inevitability of death, with the absence of an instruction manual for life. Recognizing this can be a source of solidarity. When you realize that your existential fatigue is shared by countless other human beings throughout history, you move from the position of unique victim to the position of participant in the universal human experience. This doesn't make your experience less valid or less important, but it puts it in perspective. You're not suffering alone, you're participating in something that's part of human nature. And maybe it's precisely in this participation that you can find something resembling meaning. Not the cosmic meaning that may never exist, but human meaning, created by connection, by mutual understanding, by shared compassion. If you've made it this far, if these words have found echo in your experience, maybe you want to be part of a community that understands that not all journeys are linear, not all progress is visible, not all victories are loud. If this makes sense to you, consider subscribing to this channel. It's not a commercial invitation, it's an invitation to belong to a space where your existential questions are valid, where your fatigue is understood, where your search for authenticity is respected. Sometimes, knowing there are other people navigating the same waters can make all the difference in how we face our own crossing. The genius of Camus was in not promising easy solutions to difficult problems. He didn't say that accepting the absurd would cure your existential exhaustion. He said that accepting the absurd could transform this exhaustion into something productive, into something that could be used as fuel for a more authentic life. Instead of spending energy fighting against the absurd nature of existence, you can use that energy to create, to love, to connect, to live intensely within the limitations that life imposes. The new year will arrive regardless of how you feel about it. People will celebrate, make plans, post optimistic reflections. And maybe you'll continue feeling that familiar fatigue, that disconnection from the general enthusiasm. But now you know this doesn't make you a broken or defective person. It makes you a person who has reached a point of existential maturity where simple answers no longer work, where you need something more substantial to feel alive. And maybe that's precisely your advantage. Maybe while others are chasing superficial motivations that will exhaust themselves in a few weeks, you're in a position to build something more lasting and more real. Something that doesn't depend on special dates or manufactured enthusiasm, but that springs from your own need to live in a way that makes sense to you, not to others. Camus wrote that we must imagine Sisyphus happy, even though condemned to push a stone up a mountain for all eternity, knowing it will always roll back down. The image is powerful, because it suggests we can find satisfaction in the very process of living, regardless of final results. We can find meaning in the effort itself, in the choice to continue, in the decision not to surrender to the absurd, but also not to deny its existence. Your existential fatigue can be seen this way, not as a problem to be solved, but as a condition to be accepted and transformed into something productive. You can be tired of certain ways of existing without being tired of existence itself. You can be exhausted from living according to others' expectations without being exhausted by the possibility of living according to your own choices. You can be fatigued from seeking meaning in places where it doesn't exist without being fatigued by the possibility of creating meaning where you are. Time will pass regardless of your emotions or your energy. The calendar will turn its pages without asking your opinion. The seasons will succeed each other without waiting for your disposition. But within this implacable flow of time, you have small spaces of choice, small moments where you can decide how you'll respond to what life presents. And maybe it's in these small spaces that you can find not the cure for your existential fatigue, but a way to transform it into something that connects you more deeply with your own humanity. In the end, the new year doesn't restart for those who are already tired of existing, because existential fatigue isn't a matter of chronology, it's a matter of depth, But this doesn't mean you're condemned to eternal suffering. It means your transformation will happen on another level, deeper, more real, more lasting than any superficial change that a date could symbolize. It means that when you finally find your authentic way of existing, it won't depend on calendars or external motivations. It will spring from within, sustained by your own courageous choice to continue creating meaning in a world that seems to have lost its way.